Locked On Sports Atlanta on the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome into our Hawks POSTCAST. We appreciate you guys, of course, for joining us during this holiday season. And of course, I am your host, Tenitra Batiste. Alongside me is NBA and college basketball analyst DeShaun Tate. And this is your home for the best Atlanta Hawks talk. It's quick hitting, local insight you can't get anywhere else. And it's here at Locked On after each and every game. And of course, our Hawks POSTCAST is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And of course, the #1 sports podcast network. So DeShaun, the Hawks they bucked, but clearly we're not ready to fight in the end. We'll talk about the turning point that saw an 18-point lead just evaporate. And talk about our takes on how the Hawks were not going to play with fire in another close game, but actually did. So we're talking about yet another loss, 126-123, the final tonight over the Chicago Bulls. And DeShaun, I don't know about you, but this one, it wasn't the worst loss in this stretch of 10 games where they've lost 8 of their last 10, 3 in a row, 3 in the last 4, et cetera, et cetera. But it was just painful. And I think in large part or in part, it was painful because as your take mentioned, it was like you saw them kind of melt down. And then as your take was, the scuffle was the icing on the cake.
They nucked, they bucked. And after that scuffle, they sucked. It didn't look very good for this team at that point, Tenitra.
Yeah.
You know, I really kind of feel like that was a moment that was going to make or break the team.
Yes.
Because I really felt like one of my personal keys to victory was not to be overly emotional about what happened in the last game, how it happened, all the points, no defense, the woofing and the, talking back and forth and the jaw jacking and all that good stuff. And we always give credit for this team being one when teams try to push them around and shove them around and play bully ball and all that kind of stuff, they typically respond back pretty well. Like, hey, don't get it twisted. The South got something to say. We're more than just about Southern hospitality and all that good stuff. But then there's also instances where I think that you can kind of get into your own head and then not really realize that the opposition is talking to you the way they are because they know that's the only way that they're going to be able to slow you down and beat you. From the very moment in this game where the Hawks went on their run in the second quarter, which I think was like a 13-0 or something like that.
Yes.
They were pretty much in control for the rest of the way. I think that Chicago knew a way to get into the Hawks' head, and they went ahead and did so. This isn't the first time that this has happened. Not only has the Hawks dropped a 10-point lead with under 6 minutes left on tonight, but back in October, they had a 5-point lead as well, under 5 minutes remaining left in the game. And then some similar instances occurred then as well. So we always talk about the same teams over and over, the Charlotte Hornets, Chicago Bulls, and who's our other one? Washington Wizards. For whatever reason it is, those 3 teams of all the 3 teams have to be the ones. But I think that's ultimately what it kind of came down to at one point in time tonight, where I just didn't like the way that the Hawks had reacted. It was just a little bit too overly emotional, sensitive because of the physicality.
Yeah, and for me, and I can hear what you're saying. Certainly, it did look like Chicago was kind of throwing their weight around the gym, and it wasn't even their gym.
Bully ball.
Yeah, it felt like that. But on the same, and so I guess as an extension of that, it just felt like the intensity that I saw, especially in the first half, I just didn't see in the second half. And I think that's your point, where we were looking for that counter punch from the Bulls. You knew it was coming, but then you got it and you seem not to be ready for it. And you seem not to react to it, at least on the court, putting the ball in the basket or stopping them from putting the ball in the basket. And then the game started to slow down. And everything just started to go more of Chicago's way. And it just felt like a Chicago game. And I was taking notes, and I am getting ready for the show. And I'm at the arena, and I look up, and it's an 18-point lead. taking notes, look back up, and the lead's down to 8 in like it evaporated in what felt like a matter of seconds. And it just really, really bothered me to see the way the Hawks handled themselves in that second half. And I think that's why, for me, my take was the rematch didn't yield a different result because of defensive rebounding among like one thing that kind of stood out. But for me, it's kind of like, if you take a look at this game and just kind of break it down, when I look at that third quarter, right? Because the third quarter is where everything was even. But again, you talk about the Hawks taking a healthy lead into halftime. So for that to be even in the third quarter was a little bit disconcerting for me. I thought, okay, where are we going here? Like the energy here doesn't feel right. The focus here doesn't feel right. This feels like, although this was a tie 37 all in that quarter,
sure,
like the Bulls own that quarter, I will tell you that. And then when you look down the stat line kind of sort of speaks to that, at least from the field, with the Bulls shooting 71% from the field and the Hawks shooting and 61. I'm not saying that it's not respectable.
I get it.
Shooting 71%. It kind of like, okay, trend that was bothering me. And then we start talking about something that's been a bit of a challenge for the Hawks, and that's kind of winning the battle on the boards. You didn't. You haven't. And you
That's
haven't
right.
really been doing that for a while now. And so when you start digging into it, it was like the Bulls were taking the third quarter and saying, we're putting the blueprint in place, slowly but surely. And then we're going to go ahead and give you the knockout punch in the fourth quarter. And yes, it may have taken all the way until the last minute of the fourth quarter. But if you look back at that third quarter, I really feel like the Bulls started to kind of impose their will on this game and decide, hey, we know what we need to do. We need to go inside and we need to make sure that we're able to hit our shots. But for the 30% of the time that we don't hit our shots, we got to make sure that we then get the ball back for second chance opportunities. And that's how this game slowly but surely started to get away from the Hawks.
I'm glad that you said that, Tenitra, because that was just a couple things that I had written down. You must have been peeking at the handy dandy notebook over here. I call it the answer key. And I think that you mentioned something about, the getting it down within 6 points. That happened probably about 2 or 3, maybe 4 times within this game. The Hawks knew that they had control as long as they were able to sustain that lead.
Yes.
I think that ultimately they really needed to put their foot on the gas and on the necks of the Chicago Bulls, in which they failed to do during the critical possessions and quarters that you just mentioned for Chicago. And because they refused and just didn't do that and put them out of their misery, Chicago knew that as long as that they were still in the game, not because of anything Chicago was doing, but because of the things that Atlanta was allowing them to do.
Yes.
I think is where they kind of ultimately knew that they would be in position, if not nothing else. If we could just keep it within a 2, maybe 3 possibly, but certainly within a 2 possession game, then they like their chances. And I'm glad that you mentioned something about the rebounds as well, because one thing that I thought that they really need to do to be successful tonight was to box out, because you don't have Kristaps Porzingis. Yep, I'm going to mention it again. They really had to try to limit their second chance, limit Chicago's second chance points. And knowing that they were at a size disadvantage, even though Okoro is a bigger wing, he's still kind of like a forward that plays very physical. You got Buzelis out there, you got Vucevic. I think Josh Giddey is like 6'7". He's a pretty big guard himself. So you're really putting yourself in position where you really have to box out, put a body on guys, and not give them opportunities to get offensive rebounds. And then also I thought you had to kind of pick up at half court, play some denial basketball, stay at home, maybe flash on some of the screens, things like that. Defensively, and I see what some people have put in the chat. Defensively, I do think that it's clear that Trey has been a little bit of a defensive liability, but I think that that's something we've known already. That's kind of up to the coaching staff, and yes, up to Trey to try and get better at that. But he is who he is. You drafted who you drafted, so I do think that there's multiple layers to the onion, and almost everybody, can have their fingers pointed at them for tonight.
Yeah, exactly. And unfortunately, as you mentioned, the Hawks were without Kristaps Porzingis. We knew that was going to be ongoing. But you got no Mo Gay, and you have
Correct.
no Dyson Daniels. So
That's
when
correct.
you talk about the size and the length, you're missing that with no Mo in the lineup, and Dyson Daniels giving you everything else from a defensive perspective. You're missing out on that as well. Not making excuses, just kind of saying, hey, these were some of the contributing factors as well. But those weren't the main contributing factors. There were two big contributing factors in the fourth quarter that were the turning point. We'll talk about it next up. This episode of our Hawks Postcast is brought to you by FanDuel. NFL Sundays move fast. One big play and suddenly everything feels different. That's what makes live betting with FanDuel so exciting. You're not just watching the game, you're reacting to it in real time. With FanDuel, you can place bets as the action unfolds. Every drive, every momentum swing, every highlight moment. Live betting is best when the game starts to shift. A receiver gets hot, a defense tightens up, or the momentum flips after a turnover. FanDuel lets you jump into the moment. Live spreads and money lines adjust instantly. Player props update as guys heat up. You can bet next touchdown scores, drive results, totals, and more. It keeps you locked into every snap, every drive, every possibility. So if you want to be right in the middle of the action this season, visit FanDuel.com and place your NFL live bets all season long. FanDuel, the game moves fast, and so can you. This episode of our Hawks Postcast is brought to you by Robinhood. Nobody knows your money goals better than you. Robinhood puts you in control of your money with tools that work as hard as you do, locking in on every opening, beating your PR, beating it again. Channel that drive into your money. Robinhood puts you in control of your money. Trade stocks and ETFs, options, futures, and crypto all on one platform. You can now build and execute your own trades from a desktop with Robinhood Legends advanced tools, or take advantage of the new Robinhood strategies with a tailored portfolio managed by a team of experts. You expect more from yourself. Expect more from your money. Get started today at Robinhood.com/yourmoney. Again, that's Robinhood.com/yourmoney. Your money, your move. Thanks to our everydayers for making the Hawks Postcast your first listen of the day. And thank you for making Locked On the #1 sports podcast network. So, DeShaun, we talked about the fact that this game knotted up 37-all in the third quarter. But really what was the dagger for the Bulls to just stick it to the Hawks were a couple of runs in the fourth quarter. And those two runs were the turning point.
Time to reveal where the game was won or lost. It's the turning point.
So yeah, we know, DeShaun, as I always say, it's cringeworthy for me, but hey, I've learned to accept the fact that when we are talking NBA, pro ball, runs are going to happen. But at the 9-minute mark in the fourth quarter, the Bulls had gone on a 10-0 run that had spanned across about a 3-minute time frame. And then you look a little bit deeper into the game with under 3 minutes left, they go on another 9-0 run. And within this stretch of time as well, the Hawks literally scored all of 5 points. It sandwiched in between there. So when something like that happens, two big runs, you only score 5 points. You end the game being outscored in the fourth period, 34-18. That's probably a recipe for an L.
No, it definitely is. And listen, I mean, within that stretch, you have to also consider when you're talking about that 9 or 10-0 run by Chicago, 0 for 5 from the field for Atlanta, and then 2 turnovers as well. Certainly doesn't help the situation very much. I think that's ultimately something that kind of hurt. And I mean, I think much of this game, which I don't think you could say all the time, but I think much of this game, part of it plays into where there's things that were transpiring that you won't necessarily see show up on the box score. You had to be there. You had to see it. You had to see the way that it appeared that Chicago was frustrating Atlanta, especially with its defense. I think there were a couple instances maybe where I think down the stretch, Atlanta had missed a free throw or two where they could have really helped cement putting them in position to where they can just kind of extend the lead a little bit more.
Mm-hmm.
But I just think that ultimately when you have another team on the other side that's able to get you out of your game, and then shots maybe not falling or what have you. And then just so happens to be that you're not able to get stops on the other side. I know that Josh Giddey was a big part of that. Trey Jones was playing a really big part from the point guard position as well. And that just really, it just didn't help. V. Krejci wasn't the same shooter that he was earlier in the game, particularly in the first half. I mean, shots for Nickeil Alexander-Walker and even some for Jalen Johnson were even harder to come by at that point. And so I just think that it really takes someone that I'm kind of curious to know, who is that leader that pulls the guys together in those huddles and say, you know what, slow down. We've been here before. We know what they're doing. We know that this is the only way that they can beat us. They went on a run. It was inevitable that they would at some point. The question was about, how are we going to respond to this? We're in our home court, and we know what just happened. 48 hours ago or whatever it was. We have to be better than that. If you're going to beat us, you're going to beat us. But it ain't going to be because you got us out of whack or because you got us out of sync or out of rhythm or accustomed to what we're used to doing, speeding us up, slowing us down, or talking us out of our game. I think ultimately that's what happened. And if you didn't watch this game, you probably wouldn't know it just by looking at highlights and box scores.
Yeah. And one thing's for sure, you got to pick and choose. Like, you can't be in a position or a situation where you literally are allowing the other team to outscore you, or you're allowing them to score at will, but you're at least not keeping pace. So you weren't playing defense and you weren't getting stops, but you also weren't hitting shots. And it was, I'll be honest with you, it was a little bit confusing for me because we saw the Hawks go on a 7-0 run to start the game. Nickeil Alexander-Walker scored 5 of those 7 points, right? And then he scores 12 points, I think, in the first quarter alone. But then we end up seeing that he ends the game, looking at the box score here, and he ends the game with 21 points. But ultimately speaking, a lot of that damage was done just in the first quarter. So you literally only scored 9 points the rest of the way. So that was a little bit troubling for me. And sometimes, and again, I know Quinn is, we already know a lot of what he's going to do is play around and tinker with the lineups, right?
That's right.
Yeah, and so I don't mind. I can't say I don't mind. I will say I am prepared for that to happen. But there were just moments where I wasn't quite sure, like, where he was going with some of the lineups. I can remember thinking at the end, okay, is Quinn going to go for the lineup that gets him a stop, or is Quinn going to go for the lineup that gets him a shot? And I honestly said, right about now, I don't think he has that lineup either way. In the fourth quarter, I don't think he had a lineup that could give him a stop. I don't think he had a lineup that could give him a shot. And the numbers kind of bear witness to that, because when you look at Chicago, they shot, I think we said 70% in the third quarter, which was the all-important one where they were able to at least score the same number of points as the Hawks and say, okay, now let's see, what happens down the stretch. But Chicago still shot a very respectable 52% in that fourth quarter. Hawks just 30% from the field, 17% shooting from 3. And again, the Bulls it actually was identical, 16.7%, both of them. But here's the difference. Like I just said, field goals, and you and I are about the fundamentals. Bulls out here shooting 85% from the free throw line.
Yep.
Hawks out here shooting 67%.
I'm glad you said it before I did.
It cannot happen. It can't happen in a game when everybody knows it. We'll tell it to you guys until you figure it out. Although I see some of our everydayers have already figured it out in the chat. When it's the Wizards, the Bulls, and the Hornets, we already know you have got to do you got to get the fundamentals right, because these games they're, every now and again they're blowouts, but for the most part, even if one team has a double-digit lead, whether that's the Hawks or the Hornets or the Wizards or the Bulls, whichever one of those three the Hawks is playing, they're going to come back and make it a game. So it was very frustrating as well to see them have all of those opportunities to get to the free throw line even late and not be able to take advantage of it. Because again, we're only talking about a 3-point loss. So if we're talking about a 3-point loss and you literally had 3 free throw attempts even if you make one of them, that's
just
great.
one.
It's just one. Because if you had made one at the appropriate time, that would have impacted on the back end.
I think, Tenitra, in closing for me, in conclusion, after looking at what happened 48 hours ago and looking at today, one thing sticks out to me for sure. We could point the finger at this one, that one, and any and everything in between. I think one thing I can say confidently is that this Chicago Bulls team has an identity. I have a very good feeling of what type of team this is, whether you think it's a really good one, whether you think it's a really bad one. I feel like that they know who they are and they're okay with accepting whatever the results are as long as they play according to whatever that is. I'm not sure that this. I'm pretty confident that we're having conversations again for another season that this team, the Atlanta Hawks, don't know what they are. I'm curious to know. We might have to have this conversation on another night because I know we're up against it. But I'm really curious to know from you and from our listeners and watchers. Thank you much. Tweet at us, feel free, or in the comments section as to what you really believe that this Hawks team's identity really is.
I think it was perfectly said, DeShaun, because I'm going to leave it with I don't know, but that is a question that I asked walking out of the arena. You literally somehow got punked in your own gym. Again, because that team knew that's who they are. They know they're the Bulls are bullies. They know this. Who are you, Hawks? And when are you going to kind of stand up and be that for 48 minutes so that we're talking once again about you getting back in the win column? The Hawks Postcast is the #1 place to hang out after every game, and it's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So remember to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. And for more on the Hawks, check out our guy, Brad Rowland. Head on over to Locked On Hawks. See you next time.